you had a choice between eating some Kellogg's Corn Pops, okay, or eating the box it came in, which one would be considered healthier? Go ahead and comment down below. I initially thought it would be the box, but apparently I'm completely wrong because there was a recall a few years ago on 4 Kellogg's cereals. We got Corn Pops, we got Honey Smacks, Fruit Loops. It's spelled F-R-O-O-T, so it's not actual fruit because there's no fruit in it, and Apple Jacks. So they recalled 28 million boxes of cereal. That's a lot of cereal. So first thing is that kind of got my attention is I'm like, that's just 4 cereals that they recalled, right? That's not all the cereal that they have out there. And then if you go to the grocery store, this might be a shocker, and I'm being very sarcastic. They have an entire aisle, okay, in the grocery store dedicated to cereals. Incredible. So what does this tell me? It tells me that there's a lot of kids or adults eating cereal to have that much cereal. And the bigger surprise was that there's really nothing in the actual cereal that they did a recall on. It was actually in the box. Apparently, there was some, and they described it as this uncharacteristic off flavor and smell. It had a metallic smell to it, which possibly could create, but only temporary, some nausea and diarrhea in some people. And it is true that when you eat things, part of the box it came in does end up in your body. Now, the other thing that's interesting when I was reading up on this is that Kellogg's had a little history, and apparently it started out as being somewhat a health food because it used certain fiber extracts, and at that time didn't have all this extra sugar. So apparently it did help some people, but it was the initial intention was to create a healthy product. And then as I was reading this, it went on to say a commitment that continues today. And that kind of threw me off because I don't know. I just assume that everyone knows that cereal is not a health food, but apparently it's promoted as something that's healthy. And I just found that interesting. And I wanted to create this video on this just to kind of take a look at how this product is promoted. I wanted to know how can they possibly justify something that is ultra processed as a processed food? I mean, it's not just processed food, it's ultra processed food with added sugars. In fact, it is the second source of calories for kids with added sugar. So I wanted to see how they justified it. Well, they said that they removed the trans fats. You have to know that trans fats are the partially hydrogenated oils, right? When you continue to cook and process this oil under high heats, it then becomes fully hydrogenated. So you're not going to have trans fats in fully hydrogenated oils, only in the partially hydrogenated. But from my viewpoint, going from a partially hydrogenated to a fully hydrogenated does not increase the health of that oil. So they did say they reduce the sugar, which we'll take a look at, and they reduce the sodium, right? Because everyone knows that sodium is dangerous. And they added more nutrients, of course, in the form of synthetics, and they also added more fiber in the form of whole grains. They actually even said that this cereal is nutrient dense. I'm not kidding, okay? Because of the added synthetic vitamins that they added, it became now this nutrient dense foods. But if you look on the label, I'm still trying to figure out what is nutrient dense about that because the percentages are still very small. And they actually even claim this based on this one study. It can decrease the risk of obesity and being overweight. Now, how can they possibly claim that? Well, if you look at the study, it's based on this one observational study, right, which is not very credible. But this study is based on a single 24-hour dietary recall. So just asking the parents, what did your child eat in the last 24 hours? And then they just kind of correlated that with that's probably what they're eating on a regular basis. Well, there's no way you can figure out what a child eats just based on one day. That's not going to figure out the dietary pattern. Plus, it involves recall and remembering exactly what they ate. And a lot of these kids go to school, and about 30% of their calories comes from the food at school. And so the parent doesn't always know what they ate at school. But that's what they base this claim on, this one observational study with a 24-hour remembering what the child ate. They also claim that it can contribute to an overall healthy dietary pattern of eating, which is so bizarre to me. And if you restricted the cereal, it can actually lead to an overall reduced intake of nutritious food with unintended consequences. I'm still trying to scratch my head on how can they possibly say that. Well, I've never seen so many lies in one paragraph in my life because the real consequence of getting this out of the diet would be a greatly improved body, a child that has more focus, a better mood, a child that doesn't gain all this weight, a child that doesn't develop metabolic syndrome or blood sugar issues. So then if you look at the label of corn pops, right, this is what the ingredients are: corn, sugar, corn syrup, hydrogenated soy oil or cottonseed oil, wheat starch, and synthetic vitamins. And this is interesting because 1 cup of this cereal is 27 grams of carbohydrate, but only 9 grams of sugar with zero fiber. So wait a second. Here we have this refined carbohydrate, and it has a lot of carbohydrates in it, but it's not all sugar. So what's making up the rest of that carbohydrate? It's not fiber, even though they're kind of talking about how great their food is because of all the fiber that's in it. Well, it's 0 grams of fiber and 1 gram of protein. What are these carbohydrates? Well, it's starches, right? So a starch is slightly different than a sugar. A sugar is kind of like broken down into a smaller carbohydrate, but starches have these chains of additional sugars that are attached. And sometimes there's various loopholes with adding maltodextrin and even some of the corn syrup solids of putting them under the category of a carbohydrate and not the sugar, even though it behaves like a sugar, right? It can break down the sugar pretty quick, but legally they don't have to kind of claim all those sugars if it's less than 1 gram. Now let's take a look at Fruit Loops, right? We have whole grain yellow corn flour, we have sugar, we have wheat flour, we have whole grain oat flour, and then they add the modified corn starch. Then they added the hydrogenated oil, the soy oil, and then they also add maltodextrin, like I mentioned before. And then another source of fiber is the corn soluble fiber, which is a new kind of a synthetic fiber because it's so processed. And then they add red 40, yellow 5, and blue 1. These are food colorings. All right, now 3/4 of a cup, not even 1 cup, is 24 carbs, 2 grams of fiber. Now, again, there's not a lot of fiber in these cereals. So then we have 10 grams of sugar and 1 gram of protein. So, based on all this information, my conclusion is the box is much healthier to eat than the actual cereal. What do you think about this? Go ahead and comment down below. I just want to say the best food for a child, if you're going to feed a child breakfast, would be eggs. And if you have not seen this video on eggs, you should check it out. I put it up right here.